Thank you all for joining. Welcome to the Fund Secrets Revealed webinar episode number 2. We have a couple of very interesting guests. I'll let them introduce themselves. Michael is an attorney for Avestor. He's helped launch many funds, and he has an extremely interesting background. Michael, it was great to see you in the Avestor Summit last week. I think a lot of the fund managers who came to the Avestor Summit were blown away with your background. I'll let you introduce that and briefly talk about it. Sanjay, of course, is the CEO of Avestor, but more importantly here, he's in the role of the fund manager because he is the fund manager for Ariel LP, one of the Avestor funds. And he has experience working with more than 100 funds now. We have launched more than 100 funds. So I think both of them can, and he's our conduit to all our attorneys, and he works very closely with Michael. What did Michael call it? Your best friends or something like that, BFFs? So they have a great relationship, and I think he translates legalese, except that Michael is not very legalese. He can speak outright to people in their own language. So with that, why don't we get started? Michael, I gave you a brief introduction, but if you want to introduce yourself, and then Sanjay can introduce himself, and we can get started. A couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please don't put them in the chat window. You'll have plenty of time to ask both the panelists questions. If you could put it in the Q&A panel, you should be able to see that in your Zoom window. Then I can prioritize them. I'll try to club them. Maybe we won't answer it right away, but I'll make sure we get to it before the end of the session. So Michael, it's all yours. Let's hear some of your interesting background.
Well, thank you. I consider myself to be a global expert these days on entrepreneurship. I love entrepreneurship. I love working with entrepreneurs. And my general background is I'm an attorney, investment banker. I function as a coach, I function as a consultant, and I have spent an earlier part of my career and an extensive part of my career working with small institutions in Europe, the USA, and a little bit in Asia. Today, I focus on helping entrepreneurs acquire, build, and sell companies, grow them, start them. And I'm constantly looking and working with people to find the next successful up-and-coming entrepreneurial people. And one thing I've learned in dealing with Avestor and Badri and Sanjay is they are a nest of very impressive people that in their own right have a life and careers that is phenomenal. And it was a pleasure to meet 50 or 60 or more of these people and to find out their individual successes. And so to be able to take people like that are moving into the fund of funds works right in with what I'm all about today, and that is helping people fulfill their dreams and become the level of entrepreneur they want. So when I went out to the retreat that they had in Portland, we talked about recent changes in the Securities and Exchange Commission rules that impact private fund managers. And we talked about the challenges in raising capital today in the private fund industry. So those are the things that we'll probably talk about or answer your questions about. But if I can help any of you in any way, I'm always glad to touch base with people that are interested in what we're doing.
Very cool. Very cool. At some point, you should talk about the fact that you're a criminal lawyer and you had your own legal show on TV, but we'll get to that later, I guess. So Sanjay, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So Sanjay Vora here. I've been in the tech industry for 25 plus years, worked in big tech for almost 23 years. And then I decided to become and switch to an entrepreneur. The reason I did that was because I was a passive investor, invested a lot of money in the stock market, but then realized I needed to diversify into alternative investments, including real estate and other alternatives. So I started doing a lot of that. As I did that for over 5-6 years, I realized that there was an opportunity to really make things easier, really in the fund space. And so we started our own fund called the Avestor Ariel Fund. And then we built a technology platform in parallel that would make it easier for investors and managers. So that's kind of what we've been doing for the last couple of years. We've started scaling up the business. And as Badri said, we've got over 100 funds, signed up and, getting through the process and getting them all launched and helping them scale. They're all at the different stages, but it's been fun.
Very cool. Thank you, Sanjay. So just wanted to, before we proceed with, I had a few seed questions, and I encourage you to put your questions in the chat. I just wanted to read a standard disclaimer. You guys have seen this. Before we begin today's discussion, we would like to remind all viewers, both present and those watching the recorded version, of an important disclaimer related to our panelist, Michael Fugler, and the content that will be shared. The views and opinions expressed by Michael during this webinar are for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. While Michael is a qualified attorney, he is not acting as your attorney through this platform or in connection with this webinar. The information presented is general in nature and may not apply to your specific circumstances. Therefore, it should not be relied upon or used as a substitute for seeking legal advice from your own counsel. Thank you all for keeping that in mind. This is an educational webinar and should not be construed as official legal advice. Yeah. So why don't we start at the basics? What is a fund of funds, and how is this different from syndications, and why should I consider a fund of funds? Either of you can take it, and then we'll go through some questions.
Well, I'll take the 30,000 foot view and the historical view. Historically, fund of funds was created for and evolved it being the gathering of money to put into a fund of funds, and that fund of funds would then drop money through their due diligence process into other funds. So the fund of funds manager oversaw and managed other managers who had their own funds, maybe in different specializations, long and short fund, or maybe a dividend fund, or whatever they're doing. That's historical perspective. And then it's evolved. I'll throw it to Sanjay. He may want to drill down a little bit more from that historical overview.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a variety of different types of funds out there, but they're basically pooled investment vehicles. What we've done here is slightly different than the traditional model for the last 30, 40, 50 years of pooled funds, where everybody basically pools their money into a single fund. The manager decides what assets they're going to go in, and then all investors get exactly the same assets in the fund. To what we've done is tried to build a combination of the best of both worlds of syndications and the advantages of syndications and the advantages of funds, and really trying to create something that is much more convenient for investors and also operationally more efficient for managers with the customizable fund. But in general, there's two types of funds or two types of strategies or combination that can be used. One is use the fund, pool the money, and invest in another another exempt offering, or it could be in another exempt fund, or it could, or you can actually replace your original syndication or SPV using the fund. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can use a fund, and it gives you a lot of flexibility, and that's what we've tried to maximize with the customizable funds.
Very cool. Very cool. Can you talk about when a customizable fund would be who a customizable fund would be a fit for, Sanjay, and why you would choose a blind fund over a customizable fund? I know you talked about it.
Yeah,
but if you could go into some more depth.
Yeah, so blind funds are, in the traditional sense, blind funds are great funds for folks that have a good solid history, track record, a large investor base, and the trust of the investor base that they're willing to give you a significant amount of money without a lot of say in the underlying deals. Because at the end of the day, when you put your money into a pooled blind fund, you're trusting the manager, because the manager is picking and doing all the due diligence and seeking the investments, and your capital just automatically goes into that as a partial share. And so if you're an extremely well-established sponsor, you've got, and you're trying to raise a lot of money and you're trying to do it extremely fast in a very short period of time, a blind fund may be the right way to go, just because you want complete control. And you don't want investors kind of in the middle of the mix, other than to just give you the money. With the customizable fund, it works if you're the model is a little bit different, where you're establishing kind of almost like the foundation of the house. And then you as a manager are deciding over time what deals are getting added. But then the investors have the flexibility to pick and choose and look at what deals and if they want to participate or not participate in those specific deals. And so think of it much more as a kind of a long-term play of starting a business and then running and scaling up a business. Whereas a blind fund is more about pooling money together reasonably quickly, a large amount of money, and then deploying the capital very quickly. That would kind of be my way to explain the differences.
Did you want to add anything to that, Michael?
Well, I think one of the things that I liked when I first met Avester and I first began to talk about how they saw the use of fund to funds and customizing it, we had a conversation really early on about the most important topic, which is who makes the decision of where an individual investor's money goes. And in that early stage of us beginning our relationship, it became clear that the desire was to shift a more historical perspective where the fund manager is making these decisions back to the individual investor and let the fund manager do his job of going and finding projects, doing due diligence, and working things together. But when he has it or she has it, then letting that investor decide, do I like opportunity A or B or C or all of them, and how much do I want to put in each one? And I thought that was an awesome approach in the direction the SEC is going and the way FINRA is going on investor protection, because it's shifting the overall responsibility to the investor and the choice to the investor. And I think that's healthy for the investor. And I think it's especially healthy from a liability perspective for the fund manager. So I really think you guys are onto something with the way you design your platform and the way you are describing the relationship between the investor and the fund manager. And I think it's the best way to go.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that feedback. So, one of the questions, I also have a sales role in Avester. I think I've talked to some of you. A very common question I get is, how does a customizable fund have only one PPM? Are you sharing all the deal information if you don't know what the deal is? How does that entire structure work? I know we have something called the deal disclosure document. If you can talk about the distinction between the common PPM and the deal disclosure document. Either of you, both of you are familiar with it. Either of you can take that question, or maybe both can answer.
I can take a first shot, and then if Michael wants to answer. So I think we worked together, and in a traditional PPM, there's two components to the PPM. The first component is a lot of the risk factors and, what are the risks associated. Generally, a fund is a new company. So, there's risks associated with that. There's risks associated with, let's say, real estate projects. If you're investing in it, there's economic risks, financial risks. So there's a disclosure that you have to do as part of that in the PPM. You also have the operating agreement for the fund that explains what is the fund's role, fund manager's role versus what is the responsibility of the investor, what rights do the investors have. And then you have the subscription agreement that is basically the agreement that this investor is putting money into the fund and joining the fund. So that's kind of all of the base documents. Then in a traditional PPM, you also have all of the deal-specific documents, such as what is the structure of how the money is going to get shared between the manager for their work and the investors for their contribution of capital. You've got kind of the targets, the metrics of financial metrics, all of that. So everything is all merged together for every deal you do as a separate deal. With our model, what we've done is taken a single structure and split it into two separate structures. One is the base PPM, base operating agreement and subscription agreement, which is the foundation, as I say it, to the house. And then what we do is for every deal that comes in, you have a deal-specific disclosure that actually talks about what are the financial metrics, how's the structure of the deal, what are the financial targets, all of that, and it's separate. And so it's kind of a two-part play. So once the investor signs the main docs and joins the fund on the first deal, for future deals, they only have to look at the subset doc, which really just talks about the deal specific metrics and doesn't get back into all of the basic risk factors and all of that for the main PPM. And that's kind of how we've structured it to make it a little bit easier for investors and that they don't have to keep going through the whole cycle over and over again. So I don't know if you want to throw anything in there, Michael.
Sure. Well, this is another component of having a good working relationship on a daily basis. And I'm really proud of the work that Sanjay and I have done over the last year and a half or 2 years, because the way we developed this thing over time was an evolution of experiences with doing more fund managers and more fund managers and more PPMs and real life experiences where we were able to more deeply develop the PPM into the story we wanted to tell, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and the disclosure and the disclosure documents. The disclosure document today is not the disclosure document of 2 years ago. And why is that? Is because he and I would collaborate week in, week out, and talk about tweaks. And we tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. And I'm really proud of the fact of what we ended up with together. With Sanjay and I working together, we have a really neat set of risk factors that are very applicable to the type of fund managers that we see. If they're going to be investing in other people's funds and other limited partnerships, we cover those bases real well. If they're going to be investing in their own real estate deals, we cover that. And then when you get to the disclosure documents, we've developed them in such a way that they give you an additional set of risk factors if they're particularly applicable to a particular deal. And so what a project costs, what its expenses are, what your expectations are, all of the details and nuances that you would pull out of a standard PPM are built in the design of the disclosure document. And you have the other document to refer back to. So you always have access to that original PPM and all of the things you may want to refresh your memory with at any time. But then as you go through each deal, you get to see those particular risk factors or those particular deal components and make your own decision. So I think it is the best of both worlds. And when you're on the original PPM, we describe who the person is, who the fund manager or managers are. And then we talk about what is their vision? What do they plan to do? You know, are they going to be in just real estate? Are they going to go into ATMs and car washes and storage facilities and all these other things? So we give an overview and a summary of who they are and where they're going in that PPM. And then the deal discloses what they have found in the market that they're ready to bring to the investor's attention. And I think it works extremely well.
Very good. Very good. Great distinction between what's in the PPM and what's in the deal disclosure document, which I think is one of the key differentiators, really. That's what enables you to have a common PPM without having to go back to the attorney each time for adding a new deal. One other question I get is, I think, there are various frameworks out there. There is Reg D, Reg CF, Reg A frameworks. What framework does the customizable fund work with? Does it work with any of these frameworks? And can you comment a little bit on that?
The most popular exemption, first, let's start with this. If you go out into the world and in the United States of America and you want to raise capital, you have to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission. That's a general rule, except if you fall under one of the granted exemptions under the SEC rules. So when you're talking to a securities lawyer or you're talking to people that are experienced in the industry, one of the first questions you'll probably hear is, what exemption are you using to do your deal? What exemption are you using to raise your money? So you need to be knowledgeable about what the exemptions are that are out there, and then say, well, what do most private fund managers use? Historically and currently, most private fund managers are using a Regulation D. And in a Regulation D, it gives you the opportunity to raise an unlimited amount of money. The question is, are you going to use a rule called Rule 506 to do that? And if you do, are you going to want to advertise to people you don't know? Or are you going to only want to deal with people you have a pre-existing relationship with? So if you say, well, I know a number of people, but I don't know if I can raise 10 million or 15 million from them. So maybe I need to advertise. Well, then you would use a Regulation D 506C. So the buzzwords in the industry of 506C, 506B. If you have pre-existing relationships and you're not going to advertise, you use a 506B. If you want to get an expansion of your network and go talk to people or advertise social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, that would be a 506C. And you can go out and raise as much money as you want. Now in a B, there are some limitations. And that is if you're going to do with pre-existing relationships, you can let in 35 non-accredited, sophisticated people. So that's a cap, 35 of those kind of people. The accredited investors, you can raise as much and as many of them as you want. On a 506C, everybody's accredited. So that's two pathways that you can make some notes, write the rule down, and then if you want ask questions of Sanjay or I on this about either one of those, feel free to do so. But that's a big, broad overview of what most people are using in the industry for private fund raising.
Yeah, I would say probably 95% of all private money is raised through Reg D. And then the other, smaller amounts are raised through Reg A and Reg CF. Reg CF was historically pretty limited because the amount you could raise on a single offering was, I believe, 1.1 million, but I think the numbers are higher now. But it is,
they've expanded it.
Yeah, they expanded it to, I think, 5 million now.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty limited. It's good for a single offering, but it's not good for a fund that's going to last for 5-10 years. Reg A is a good option, but the problem is it's very long drawn out process because you have to you have to put all the docs together. You have to get somebody like Michael to then negotiate the docs with the SEC and get it approved, which is a much longer drawn out process. The advantage is you can then once you get everything approved, you can do non-accredited investors. But then there's additional costs associated with it, ongoing. So there's some real trade-offs. So Reg D is generally the most, pretty much the most used out there when it comes to the frameworks.
And to just follow up that comment, one of the ways you can look at it is this: if you use a Reg D, 506C or B, you don't have to register anything with the regulators or the SEC. If you use a Regulation A, you have to file a registration statement called the Form 1A. So that's a big difference because when you have to file with the regulators, then you have the back and forth of wanting to scrutinize everything in there, and they have to go through and make sure that they don't see anything that they believe could be a material misstatement. They want to check facts and figures and have you answer questions. So it's a longer process, a more expensive process, but you can go out and get a lot of small shareholders, and it is an option. And certainly it should be one consideration that you look at overall. But Sanjay is absolutely right. Most people in this space and the private fund manager use Reg D, either 506C or 506B.
Very good. Very good. Great answers. So just a quick reminder, this is your opportunity to ask questions specific to your situation. So please do use the Q&A to ask any questions you may have. So I want to clarify if a customizable fund is a replacement for syndication deals? And is it meant for capital raisers? Or if I'm doing my own real estate deals, is it a good fit? What are the trade-offs?
Yeah, so I mean, I could pipe in a little bit. So the customizable fund can do both. It can be, the way we've designed it is with enough flexibility, as I always keep coming back to. It's like the foundation of the house, and then you can look at each individual deal and decide what you want to do with it. So, if you want to raise capital to do your own purchases, then we have a structure that allows you to basically pool the capital into the fund. The fund then will be able to go and purchase the asset and replace the syndication. The deal disclosure document would still have a lot of the key components in terms of the sources of capital, the uses of capital, the acquisition fee, the disposition fee, property management, all of the things that you would traditionally see in syndication docs. You would incorporate that into the individual deal disclosure and then use the fund to raise the capital and then go purchase and acquire the property. Through the structure, we can show managers how to do it. Or it can go the other way, and you can use it in the traditional model of a capital raising vehicle, and then group the capital together, and then deploy the capital into somebody else's private exempt offering, which is likely going to be a 506c or a 506d offering as well, or deploy it into a different fund. Sometimes there's a lot of larger funds out there that managers want to pool capital and get into. Especially with some of the leading firms might have minimums of $250,000 to $500,000. So the customizable fund allows a manager to pull the capital together to hit the minimum, and then the fund goes and invests and hits the minimum on the very high minimum pooled funds. So a lot of different ways in which you can use the fund.
So one way to look at this too is I'm not going to try to cover every nuance in every situation, but we can split into two groups. A group one in the fund manager world, private fund manager world, I'm going to use a couple of terms here that you may or may not want to write down to just Google and get your own information, but it's called an exemption of 3C1. Those people are in the business of gathering funds together for their fund, and they're looking to take those funds and find deals that primarily are other people's deals, or deals that they want to deal with that are not in necessarily just real estate. So they're going to be passive investors and can be in other people's deals. So depending on what your objective is as a future private fund manager, because it's my understanding most everybody on this call is a prospective, possibly pending private fund manager in the making, then you would want to look up 3C1 and say, is this the route that I want to go? And do I want to invest in other people's deals and be able to invest passively? The other is a 3C5C. The best way I can describe this is, in general terms, is you're just the real estate people. You're the real estate guy and gal, and your primary interest is real estate, whether it's single family, multifamily, storage facilities, warehouse space, whatever it may be. It's real estate related, and you really want to do your own deals, or you want to partner up with people where you're a co-manager or co-general partner. And that's going to be the direction you want to take it in. You're not really so much interested in investing as a passive investor into other people's deals. So I would start out by evaluating yourself and your circumstances and say, well, do I want to, am I mainly going to be a real estate person, and the alternative investments I'm going to be putting money into is real estate, and I feel like I have enough knowledge and experience to be a co-manager, a manager, or a co-GP on a deal? Or am I just starting out, or I have a different direction? Like some people I know have a lot of experience and been doing it for years, but they want the flexibility to go and do roll-ups of gathering car washes and other things. What do you call the laundromats and cash generating facilities? Then that's the other group of people. So try to figure out which group you want to fit yourself into, and that'll help you get started so that when you're talking, you can make that decision, because you need to stamp your PPM when you first start and say, okay, I either want to be in this bucket over here or this bucket over here. and pick your exemption, and then that'll tell you the direction you can go on the deals you're looking for.
No,
in general, I think
yeah.
there's a lot of different asset classes out there, and even for us, I think we're getting surprised on all the different types of asset classes that people are starting funds with on our platform. So it has been interesting, where we started primarily in the world of real estate, but now we've gotten using the 3C1 framework that Mike was talking about. It opens up the flexibility to do a lot of other types of asset classes, from music rights to there's I think Budgery probably has a whole host
judgment liens, buying businesses.
Yeah, smaller businesses.
I had one last week with oil and gas.
Yep, oil and gas. So I think you get a lot of flexibility depending on the exemption you select.
So the one thing I want to make clear, I mean, I think in case it was lost, if you take the 3C1 exemption, it does come with a limitation of 99 investors, but gives you the maximum flexibility. So with the 3C1 exemption, you can still do your syndication deals, and you can also invest in other people's deals too. But the trade-off is that there's a maximum of 99 investors. So just wanted to, I think it came through, but I just wanted to clarify that. So let's take some more questions from the audience. One question, Jonathan Smith, if I may take the liberty of mentioning his name, asks, can you raise money from international investors with a customizable fund? And likewise, does the customizable fund allow you to invest in assets overseas? Either of you can take it.
You want to start or you want me to?
You can take it. Go for it.
Okay, so the answer to the first question is yes, you can take in money from foreign investors. There are two ways you can do it. Number one, the foreign investor could set up first thing you have to ask them is, are you doing business in the United States right now? Because many people that are interested in this space are already doing business, and they've set up their own LLC, and they have their own tax ID number. And in that instance, they can join right in, just like any of the other investors that are in the US, because they have an entity and they have a tax ID number. If a person has a US tax ID number, they're good to go directly into the PPM that you're using. If not, then you can let them in under what's called a Regulation A. We would just need to do a separate booklet for them that would allow them the vehicle and a different subscription agreement to come in as a foreign investor. They could end up finding their way to what you're doing, just not directly into the PPM initially, but through a side door. What was the other question about was it foreign people?
Foreign people, foreign assets. Can you also invest in foreign assets?
Wait a minute, y'all were talking same time. What did you say again, please?
One question was, can international investors come in? And the second part of the question is, can the customizable fund invest in assets overseas?
I think the question as to whether or not they can invest in overseas is whether or not you disclose that you had that possibility. We're thinking about it in the PPM and we're transparent about it. Then the second part of that question is, if you never mentioned it at all, could you mention it in a deal disclosure document? And I want to take a look at that. So this is not a hard, fast answer. My speculation is, but it is speculation, that if you had a total and complete full disclosure in the deal document on the deal level, and people signed off on it for that investment going into a foreign jurisdiction, we could probably find a way to accomplish that. The best way to do it is to put, because a lot of the PPMs that I do already and have done has a component in it that says we may do that. Some people, when they've seen that, said, no, pull it out. I'm only going to stay in the United States. I don't even want that possibility floated out there. So in the creation of the documents, if you're thinking about doing it, you might want to do it. Let's go ahead and put it in, bring it to the attention of me when I'm drawing up your documentation, because I know you people that are out there right now thinking about doing this would probably want to come to me, because I want you to come to me and I want to work with you. So I'd be happy to help you figure that out. But look at it like this. It's all a question of total transparency and full knowledge with all of the material facts represented that people need to know. So if you follow that common sense rule, we can probably figure out a way to accomplish most anything you want to do.
One other thought on top of everything Michael had said, I did want to highlight to the audience is that there is a difference, a couple other things to keep in mind. One is if the investors, you're advertising in the US for the fund and you get an international investor, that's one thing. If you're out going to EMEA, Europe or another South America, and you're advertising the US fund and trying to capital raise directly in those countries, each country has its own set of regulations and rules, and you have to be super careful. And you do have to engage local counsel in those countries to make sure you're following their rules for capital raising directly in their countries. So that's one thing you do want to keep in mind when you start getting into the space of international. The second area that you have to be careful in the international space, whether you're taking investors in or you're investing directly in outside entities in other countries to do purchases of assets in other countries, is the tax implications and the flow through on tax. Tax can get very complicated. That is part of the reason why it's critical. If you bring a U.S. investor in or a non-U.S. investor into your fund, they have an LLC and they have an EIN already set up in the U.S. And if they don't, we've got partners from an investor standpoint that can help with that as well. Michael and team can do it as well. But it's important because if you don't, then you're going to, as a fund and a fund manager, you're going to have to do tax withholdings on those international investors because the IRS won't have them identified. And so there's a lot of tax aspects of it too. So the one thing I always tell folks is, last year there was over $4 trillion raised in basically a 12-month period, $4 trillion in money in just the US alone into Reg D funds. So there is not, sometimes I hear people say, well, the money's dried up. There's no money in the US. No, that is completely and absolutely false. There's plenty of money out there. So the market is big, but if you've got a set of investors in another country you absolutely want to bring in to a US fund, then yeah, we can work through it.
Let me make one more comment on that point. I had offices for 10 years in Europe and raised hundreds of millions of dollars in Europe. And I can tell you that if you're a new fund manager starting out here, you want to get your feet wet and stable and your fund stable in the United States. Unless you already have a relationship. Now, there are some of the fund managers that we've done work with that either educated in foreign countries or came from foreign countries, have family in foreign countries, and they have pre-established relationships where their time, energy, and effort would be worthwhile. But if you've never been in the foreign jurisdictions, you've never been in Europe trying to raise money, and you just think, oh, I'm going to bring a new idea. I'm going to bring some American investments over there, and they'll be flocking to me because they don't see that. That's not true. They see that every day. There are people that specialize in that. I know I was one of them. We specialized in bringing U.S. opportunities to Europe every day. So it's not going to be something new. So you need to, my suggestion is don't go try to do that unless you have some pre-established relationship. Once your fund's established, once you have a first deal and you've become successful and you want to expand and you feel now you want to go into a foreign market, that's okay. Start thinking about it there. That's just a suggestion, just some advice. I have helped and seen people think they're going to go out there and carve a new path, and it's not as easy as you mentally might think. It's challenging, it's expensive, and as Sanjay pointed out, there are a lot of rules and regulations every time you get outside the US that you need to be concerned about.
Very good, very good. Let's move on to the next question. Hey, Douglas, good to see you. I know we have a call with you in a couple of days. We'll go into this into more detail. Douglas's question is, are the strengths which Avestor offers mostly for the fund administration? Or, is it for investors as well? Can you talk about the value proposition? Is it really mostly for the fund administration? Yeah. So
Yeah, so I think a Vestor view from a vision standpoint in terms of what we view our platform, we don't view ourselves as a software platform or a technology platform. We view ourselves as a business partner to the fund managers. And so being a business partner, a fund is a business. You're running a business. And if you think about it, that includes much more than, just fund administration. It also includes capital raising. It also includes accounting. It includes finance. It includes sales. Everything that a traditional business has, a fund has. And so we view ourselves as an end-to-end partner for fund managers, where, from the point you sign the agreement with us and you say, hey, I want to go start a fund, we're there with you through that part, through getting the fund up and running with our partners like Michael, get the fund launched. Then you start getting into the business of, okay, the fund's launched, what is next? We'll help you work through. We look at your, and can work with you on your, overview decks. We can work with you on getting your deals set up, all of that. So we view ourselves much more as a business partner than we do just a pure software, like just software platform where you can do things. So, we kind of view us as, come to us when you need help and we'll help you figure it out type of model. So it's a complete end-to-end solution that we're looking at. And that does obviously include all the basic administration support as well, including accounting for your fund and that as well. And we've got partner attorneys on the tax side as well. So pretty much an end-to-end play.
And I think to add to that, one of the things that attracted me to Avestor and has continued to attract and make me feel comfortable working with Avestor is when you asked that question, Badri, there was two components. One was the investor and one was the fund manager people. And that's one of the things that I liked about Avestor is the fact that they care about the investor, even though their client and their revenues coming in from the fund manager, they provide a system where the investor has easy access to see all of the necessary documentation that's laid out very easily, very clearly, that makes it easy to flow for the investor. And on the other side, as Sanjay mentioned, they're very resource rich for the fund manager, but they stress transparency. They stress ethics. They stress credibility. They stress integrity. And I think that those things that Avestor stands for and does their level best to make sure that they mold and put their fund managers into that mindset are critical, because that translates over to the investor, who then can see with clarity a very well put together set of documents and a very well structured platform and a technology that makes it easy for them to go in and learn and understand and be educated about what the opportunity is. So I think it's a good balance all the way around for both sides.
Right. So I think I'll let Sanjay take this one. It's a direct question. You can go into whatever depth you want, Sanjay. How is Avestor different from Verivest?
I think from a technology and a platform perspective, we are focused on the customizable fund. So Verivest does a lot more on the fund administration side. So if you have a traditional pooled fund, they do that one as well. And, they've got their own tech portal. I think, again, as I said before, I think we're different than Verivest in that we truly provide the everything from the front end in terms of sitting down with you, understanding your fund strategy. We do a three-way call. We understand, we help you kind of carve and put your strategy together. Then we work with Michael to make sure your docs are done. It's not just a handoff. We work with our banking partners to help you get your bank account set up. We then, and one big difference is we view ourselves as a kind of a overall business partner that even, if you need help on a marketing strategy, everything like that, we're here to try to help you figure it out. Getting your CRM set up, we help you with that. We've got a CRM called High Level that we utilize. So think of us again as a business partner end to end. which I think is slightly different than everybody else out there in the industry. The other big component is the network itself, right? As Badri mentioned at the beginning, we had or when we were chit-chatting, we had a retreat last week where we brought 50 plus folks together. That everybody flew into Portland. We want to have one of the best ways to learn is from others, and so the network is very powerful. And so we also have that aspect of it, which is you get the network. So it's all of that combined together, which is what I think it makes us differentiated.
Well, I can add one thing here. I can't really adjust the other people because I didn't work with them. But what I can say is this, is that I've had through the course of the last few years, I've had other clients that had come to me. They already had a place that they wanted to be and other platforms and they were going to facilitate other services. So they never got a chance to meet A-Vester. But I've worked with those people and seen how they get their relationship with some of these other services. And that's something that has impressed me. I can't say enough of the resources and the assisting on a daily basis that Sanjay and his team go through with these fund managers. And they're just adding more and more and more examples, templates, real life experiences, technology, more things being added, constantly being available to them to help them with their deals, with their closings, and make sure that all the documents are in line. And there's nothing more comforting when you're a private fund manager, especially just starting out, than to know you have a technology and business partner like someone like A-Vester by your side that's going to be there. And then you text them, you email them, you call them, they're going to respond. And I get involved in that on a regular basis because if there's some questions from a legal perspective or an exemption perspective, or how can we tweak this or change that, that's why I talk to Sanjay so frequently, because it's not over just when they give you the documents and put them up into the platform or put them into your dashboard. It continues, and they continue to give resources. So that's an extremely valuable component in a service like they provide. And certainly if I was a private fund manager, I'd want to have somebody like that giving me those kind of resources, because you got a place to go and get your answers, and you got people to talk to that are responsive to you. So I think it's kudos to you, and I think it's great for the industry, because that's going to help people from going astray in the wrong direction, because they have resources to help guide them back on the right path.
So I'll go ahead and ask this question too, because it's related. I jumped priority, but we'll go back to a couple of other questions later. How do you, I mean, maybe we can keep this short so we have time for other questions. How do you compare this to Cashflow portal? And I guess that you could almost generalize that on other syndication software out there. There's plenty of syndication software. Sanjay, do you want to start with that maybe?
Yeah, again, I think it's the same answer as the last one, right? I think we're the majority of the portals out there are basically technology-only portals. They're not going to help you work through the legal structure. They're not going to help you with your strategy. They're not going to help you with your marketing. They're not going to bring the network in. Yeah, some of them offer different things. They, upsell you into different things, but it's not an all-inclusive offering. I believe, and I truly believe, we are the only guys out there that are an end-to-end offering in terms of helping you, whatever stage you're in the business. We've got funds that are very large, and they still come to us, and we talk to them, about guidance, advice, where they're going. And we've got funds that are just launching right off the ground. And a good amount of work happens before even the fund launches, because there's a lot of foundational work you have to do to get it off the ground. So it's much of a broader engagement. I think if you're looking for software only and that's all you want, then we're probably not the right partner. You're going to look at us and say, well, this is way more. If you're looking for a business partner and folks that can help you with different aspects to help you scale the business, then I think we're a good fit. But, sometimes I get that, well, you're more expensive. Well, it's like you get what you pay for. So if you want something super cheap and, the lowest cost guys out there, we're probably not the right answer, because, we are your business partner. We're not trying to sell cheap software. So.
Very good. So this question, I'll paraphrase it. If one of the deals invests in multiple states and has multiple K1s, is it a pass-through to investors? Will they receive multiple K1s because they've invested in multiple states? Or is there a way to get all that into a single K1?
Yeah, I can answer that. So what ends up happening generally, first and foremost, we have built a full tax module, tax solution integrated with our software. So when fund managers receive K1s from underlying investments, we take those and put them into our investor system. Our system auto-calculates, looks at which investors are in which K1s and gives them their pro rata share of profits, losses, depreciation, capital gains, etc. So our platform is already designed to integrate existing K1s coming in, flow them in, and then dissect those K1 data and then reintegrate in. And then we have our tax partners who will log into our system, download all of that data. So, and we've also got attorney login. So Michael, for example, if you're an attorney and you want him to have access to your deal information, we can give him a login as well. But the tax partners log in, grab all the data, bring it down, and then we generate basically a consolidated single K1 for the investor. It doesn't matter how many deals they're in. For each fund, like if you're in somebody's fund and you've invested in 5 different deals in the fund, you're still only going to get one K1. So that is something unique that we're kind of building with the platform. It simplifies it. Now at the state level, what we're seeing generally happens is there will be, usually the state level flow throughs happen when there's a large sale. So let's say you invested in a deal, 100, 150,000, and you received a gain of $100,000 when the deal exits 2-3 years later. There will be a flow through. And in that case, you'll receive a state level K1. It's just like any other partnership, right? You want the flow through on depreciation, profits, and losses. But when you have a gain in a state from an asset sale, whether it's property or some other kind of asset in a specific state, there is a chance you could end up with a state level flow through that comes to your investors for that state level return. So,
very good, very good. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. There was some feedback that, hey, I'm still swimming in all the exemptions, 506B versus 506C, Reg A versus Reg F, and CF versus Reg D. So I'll put in a small plug here. We do have a white paper you can download. There are various articles also in the Avestor website. By the time you have registered on I'm sure you know what the Avestor website is, but if you log in, you'll be able to download a white paper which goes into all those exemptions and Reg A and all the different frameworks in more detail. I just put that in the chat window. And the second point I want to mention is we try to keep this largely educational. So if you do want to learn more about Avestor, the platform, and get a demo and everything else, you can go register on the website, or there are webinars which are more sales oriented in the sense that it's an overview of the platform and everything else we do. And so there is a white paper which is on starting a fund, the top 6 questions. So we put that web link right there on the website in the chat, and you can go ahead and go there. And if you want to reach out to Michael, he's so good with talking to people. He put his chat information as well. michaelfugler.com, michael@syndicationattorneys.com is his email. All that information is in the chat window. We want to thank you very much for coming to this webinar. And I'll let Michael and Sanjay say any parting words before we wind down. So,
go ahead, Michael. I'll let you.
Well, I just want to say thanks for inviting me to participate in the webinar, and thank you for this building relationship between the two of us. It's been a very enjoyable one. I enjoyed working with you and your team. I think you're a great group of people, and I'll look forward to building an even deeper relationship and expanding things in the future.
Thank you, Michael. And I'll say, I'll ditto the same. Yeah, you're an absolutely amazing partner. We've worked with you on so many funds, and every customer has a unique set of requirements when they come in, and you've been great to accept all the changes and the flexibility and work with us as we continue to improve the platform. So really appreciate the partnership.
Thank you all. So all that information is in the chat window. We also have the link to the upcoming product webinar and the download to the white paper. And thank you again for coming to the webinar. And I guess we'll wind down. So
Thanks, Padre. Appreciate it.
thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sanjay.
Hey guys, bye bye.